to stay on the subject of Joy Reid and Trump, he tweeted out or truthed out his thoughts. Low-life chairman of Comcast, Brian Roberts, has finally gotten the nerve up to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid. Also thrown out, this is news too, was Alex Wagner, the sub on the seriously failing Rachel Maddow show. Rachel rarely shows up because she knows there's nobody watching. Not wrong there. Then there's, of course, the low IQ con man Al Sharpton. What is he doing to Brian Roberts to stay on the air? He did not get fired. Nothing more than an illegal arm of the Democratic Party, meaning MSNBC. Fake news is an unpardonable sin. So here is a little reaction from the left. That was obviously from the right. Here's former MSNBC anchor Keith Olbermann with quite the take.
Melissa Harris Perry, Tiffany Cross, Joy Reid, Alex Wagner, 4 women. What did they have in common? Well, let's see. They all had their own shows, solo hosts on MSNBC, and they were all women of color, and they've all been fired. Michael Steele is a man of color, and Simone Sanders is a woman of color, and Alicia Menendez is a woman of color. Yeah, they are official. They are safe. Abby Phillip goes out there and gets tortured by this racist Scott Jennings. It's his show, and it's a bunch of people talking about how much of a racist he is, and he leans back in the chair and rocks back and forth and mugs to the camera and creates viral clips. And somebody at MSNBC said, wouldn't we rather have that than Joy Reid, who's now bald, appearing on television every night at 7 o'clock?
Whoa.
They can't help it.
The first point there, Victor, he's not wrong that they've replaced this incendiary woman with, 2 people. Michael Steele can obviously be offensive and say offensive things. Simone Sanders, more so these days. She used to be more reasonable. Now she's gotten harder left. But he's not wrong that there's a shift happening there. Because this just in, 3 more people fired at MSNBC. This is from the New York Post. The new president there continued to overhaul the embattled network, canceling shows. So maybe they're not fired. We're not sure. But their shows are canceled by left-wing anchors Ayman Mohyeldin, Katie Fang, and Jonathan Capehart. Ayman, I don't know I don't want to presume based on his name, but I do think he's Muslim. Katie Fang is an Asian woman, and Jonathan Capehart is a black man who wrote for the Washington Post and he was the only person, he was like hard leaning into hands up, don't shoot. And as I recall, he was the only person to ever acknowledge that turned out to be wrong. I'm sorry. So I give him points for that, but he is hardcore leftist woke. Here he was just the other week doing that DNC roundtable before they voted on their new president. Everybody had to say if they were non-binary because they needed to get their non-binary numbers up. And this was Jonathan Capehart, really drilling down to what was most important in the next leader of the DNC. Watch.
How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat?
All hands up.
Okay. So that's good. You all pass.
Okay. So he's now gone. He lost his show. And here's just a little background on what Mohyeldin did the weekend of October 7th. This is via National Review. He said that Hamas terrorism is ultimately the end result of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ignoring Palestinians, adding that the attacks are very deadly consequences of failed policies. So that's him. Katie Fang, I don't know what her sin was other than terrible ratings. But MSNBC is gleaning something, Victor, and that something is not a positive sign for them.
They were unhinged before George Floyd, but somewhere between Me Too, 2018-19, and George Floyd after that, they really did miscalculate. They thought that the country, because of their hatred of Donald Trump, and then especially the George Floyd riots, and then the election of Joe Biden, they thought that this was a new frontier and that Joe Biden, we were into a revolutionary period. And Biden was this useful waxen effigy for all of these Obama people, and they were going to have this radical agenda. And these people at MSNBC and to a lesser extent CNN were going to ride this wave and propel it. And they could say anything they want. The blinders were off, the muzzles were off. They could say, do anything, and they really did. And they didn't realize the mood of the country, where it was. We were in the middle of a counter-revolution because people were sick of an open border and the whole transgendered stuff and the crime and the foreign policy in Afghanistan. And the more that they just kept doubling down, the more there were signs there that the lawfare or getting Trump off the ballot or the Mar-a-Lago raid, they were triumphing that. The more that they didn't understand that was getting people angry. And so they were doubling down rather than being introspective and saying, oh my gosh, I don't think that we're quite in a hard left revolution that everybody's supporting and I think we're starting to get resistance. They could have said, let's try to be a little bit more analytical. Instead, they said, we got to get more angry and get more angry guests. And they blew themselves up. And I guess when Capehart says that he thinks that Kamala Harris lost because she was black and female, I guess he thinks that Joe Biden was what? I don't know. Was he going to win or lose? Because Joe Biden would have lost as much as I think Kamala Harris, and he was a white male. So I don't know what his point is. It's silly. Nobody in that party was going to win no matter what color or gender there was, given that the key issues that they were trying to articulate to the American people were polling about 20 or 30% support across the board.
Mm-hmm. Right. Here's now what they've done, because this won't be over for MSNBC. I've told the story before about when I went into the 9 a.m. slot on NBC, replacing Tamron Hall. The National Association of Black Journalists wrote a letter to NBC saying, you're racist because you replaced a black woman with a white woman. And NBC called them to say, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. We have lots of black hosts up and down the lineup. And they admitted they were doing a favor, that they got asked. This was a favor, and I know who called it in, to complain on behalf of this black host. So now what they've done in their primetime lineup over at MSNBC is they've replaced, out of their 1, 2, 3, 4 primetime hosts, 2 were women of color. Alex Wagner is a woman of color. I'm not exactly what her background is, but she's not white. And Joy Reid, of course, is a black woman. And they've replaced 2 out of the 4 with new hosts. In one case, they replaced Joy Reid with 2 black people and a Hispanic woman. And in the case of Alex Wagner, they put in a white woman. Jen Psaki is in replacing her. I'm not sure what they're going to... I mean, it's one thing to have Rachel Maddow there. That's the white woman they can all tolerate. Psaki's new to the game. Of course, I don't really call her Jen Psaki because whenever I hear her talk, I can only see and hear this.
To dance the kitty cat dance, we need to scratch our kitty paws, stomp our feet, and wag our kitty tails. We got the mermaid free! Yay!
That's how she talks. I'm sorry, but it is. So she's going to be taking over there, and there will be racial blowback on MSNBC. It's happening. I guarantee you by this time tomorrow, we'll have some sort of a letter, protest, fiery something. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't want to advise, anybody in the left-wing black movement, but if you look at this multiracial democracy that they keep talking about, we have now people from India, if we call them Asians in the same breath as we do people from China or Japan, they're up to about 15% of the population. We have about 15% of Hispanics. We have we don't hear from those same groups that they're going to protest. Sometimes we do, but I think what we're watching is that this is getting very tiring because we're a multiracial society now, and it's not just a white-black binary of the 1960s, and they haven't caught up to that. And they should look at these other groups, because these other groups do have extremists that are demanding these entitlements and set-asides and quotas, but most of the people are just ignoring it, and they're going out in the workplace, and they're competing, and they're doing very well. and parity. I think there's 16 ethnic groups that are not white that have a higher per capita income than so-called whites, whether it's Arab Americans or whether it's Taiwanese or Japanese Americans or people from India. And that's the model that the country's moving to. And this idea that the black leadership, and a lot of the black average rank and file understand that. And that's why Donald Trump is picking. You heard so many black people say,
except on MSNBC. You heard Wajahat Ali. Like, we had Nimrata, meaning Nikki Haley, and we have, who was the other Indian he named, an Indian American. Everybody's got to be in their group and be reminded that the evil Republicans will never really want you. They don't really want you, Nikki Haley. Yeah. They don't really want you, Vivek. They don't really want you, Byron Donalds. Your skin color is everything to them. Of course, this is projection. This is how the Democrats see it all. But let me just give you a couple of other examples, Victor, because it's amazing. You look at the people who are going, and I'm sure in 6 months we'll be doing a montage of the people who came in, and they're probably going to sound a lot like the people who left. But in any event, this Alex Wagner, she was doing 4 days in Rachel Maddow's slot, and Rachel was doing Mondays. And by the way, so the only two people remaining from those four are two white guys. They got the two white guys, Chris Hayes and Lawrence O'Donnell, survived. Yeah. They lived to fight another day. Okay, but Alex Wagner had to go. Look, in MSNBC's defense, she was totally talentless. She was pretty, and she was pretty. I'm sorry, this is like the list of her accomplishments. And left wing, which I guess somebody at MSNBC thought, okay, that'll do it. This is just a sample of Alex Wagner's kind of commentary. This is her during the DNC. Let's start with SOT 7.
J.D. Vance lecturing everybody on, what a family means, what it means to be a man. Donald Trump obviously has his own version of manhood. To see Tim Walz out there as a man who is just joyfully embracing his role, talking about struggles with infertility, it takes two partners to get pregnant. And for way too long, this conversation has been relegated to women or the carriers of pregnancies. And
the carriers of pregnancy. She caught herself for saying women and corrected it. I'll give you one more, Victor. Here she is talking about J.D. Vance after the Republican National Convention, SOT 6.
But I do think there were some sort of Easter eggs of white nationalism in the speech. One of the long sort of a paragraph, at least, about this plot in eastern Kentucky where his 7 or 6 generations of his family are buried. And his hope is that his wife and he are eventually laid to rest there and their kids follow them. It'd be the white male lineage that that defines the family history, that branch of the tree supersedes all else. And I just think the construction of this notion reveals a lot about someone who fundamentally believes in the supremacy of whiteness and masculinity. And it's couched in a sort of halcyon, revisitation of his roots, but it is actually really revealing about what he thinks matters.
This was after the RNC, Victor, where he had been introduced by his brown wife, Usha Vance, with whom he's made 3 children, proving he's not really all that obsessed with his white lineage going forward.
Absolutely. And then when she talked about the masculinity of Tim Walz and in vitro, he lied about in vitro fertilization. That was he was a complete pathological liar. And then if he's going to be so macho, he lied. He just kept spinning lie after lie after lie about his military rank, service, conditions about going to Iraq. So he was a he was a forced detractor on that ticket. And I'm talking as a white man about another white man. That white male he took votes away from a black female. He was so mediocre. He could not tell the truth. He was herky-jerky. He got on stage. He just looked like he was insane. He kept waving his arms and screaming and yelling. He was a buffoon.
Always looked like he was being attacked by bees. We continue to face uncertainty when it comes to the economy, with a perfect storm brewing as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point as the largest generation is hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. You pair that with our growing national debt and rising cost of living, and we could have a big problem. So what are you doing now to protect your family for the future? Well, gold can be a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text MK to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold and a copy of the Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. Just text my initials MK to the number 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.